Over to you for your first thoughts on the rise of Foreman when Ali was on the sidelines.
Yeah, he was like that big booming rock'em sock'em. He's like the ultimate rock'em sock'em fighter. Not too much science, technical. Just boom, boom, boom. But nobody could handle it. And just pounded his way to the world championship. He didn't have the tight punches and the slick combinations, the fancy moves, but it was just sheer brute power. And Foreman discussed that in his book. I think it's called By George. And I remember the takeaway from that was, I remember he was talking about his friendship with Sonny Liston. And Sonny Liston talked about how when he fought Muhammad Ali, he felt the energy that nobody wanted him to win. Everybody wanted Ali to win. And that factored in with his performances in both of the Clay and Ali fights, that he kind of subconsciously surrendered.
Have you met Holmes?
Oh yeah, many times.
What do you
He
think
might have
of
been
Holmes?
he might have been the real greatest. He might have been better than Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
He had better jab. He used to beat Ali in sparring in Deer Lake when he was an unknown. He might have been better than Ali. And he's the heavyweight champion of our youth. He was always on TV. He was always great performances. He might be the greatest of all time at his best. Tyson Fury would have been dedicated like Evander Holyfield and Novak Djokovic. If he would have been that serious about his training and taking care of his body, Tyson Fury might have been the greatest of all time. Yeah, Riddick Bowe clearly had the talent and the physical to be an all-time great, but what happened there was once he got to the title, he kind of shut it down. He didn't. It happens to a lot of great fighters. Once they win the title, they're never the same after. That was enough just to win the title. Yeah, it was. They said it was his cheekbone, fractured cheekbone, and it was his trainer at the time was Al Certo. It wasn't Lou Duva.
Wasn't Duva.
They wanted him to continue the fight, but they didn't know how he felt. And Andrew insisted he didn't want to continue the fight. But he told me years later, after I did an interview with him when he was on his comeback later, and he said that before the fight, he felt everything was against him. The referee came in and warned him about any kind of illegal tactics. And then when the fight started, he said Tyson headbutted him, and the referee didn't say anything, didn't do anything. So that really bothered him, and then he found his way out of the fight.
So we've got George Foreman to talk about. He passed away about 5 weeks ago, something like that. And what a legacy. You have well, first of all, introduce yourself. I'm Sifu Slim, coming to you live from West Palm Beach, Florida. Avid boxing fan for my entire life, starting with Muhammad Ali back in 1970. And I had actually trained with a world champion fighter back in Sacramento and Reno, Nevada in 1992 before his title fight. So that was a pretty amazing experience. And I also trained young boxers in Sacramento for about 2 years from 1991 through 93. And I've always been interested in boxing, and I love the training aspect of it. I've never been a boxer, been a martial artist for 35 years, but don't like getting hit in the face. I don't have a good face for getting hit in the face. And I didn't grow up fighting. I grew up wrestling, kids in the neighborhood, occasionally a fight, but very rarely. Over to Scoop for his bio and how he got into boxing.
Malinowski, Bradenton, Florida right now. Not a cloud in the sky. Ready to talk 15 rounds of boxing with you, Sifu.
So how did you get into your interest in boxing, Scoop?
It was the movie Rocky. One day I remember Saturday morning, me and a friend, Matt Shapiro, we had nothing to do. And we went, let's go to the movies. What's playing at the movies? Abbey Cinema, about 4 miles away. Rocky. Neither of us knew anything about Rocky. We had no idea what it was. We just went to see it, and we were both totally blown away by it. And that started the fascination with boxing.
So in 1970, when I was 8.5 years old, and Muhammad Ali was fighting Joe Frazier for the first time, that was a huge world event. And as a kid, I said, I got to get into this. So I listened to the fight on the AM radio. I don't think it was televised. I think it must have been on a closed circuit back then. Do you remember that fight, being a kid?
Before my way before, no. It was I didn't know what boxing was at the time. But who was the radio announcers
1970, it wasn't Cosell
on the radio?
on the radio. I don't know. Do you know?
No. Uh, no idea. No. I
No
think
idea. So you got into boxing, and then
well,
have you
probably Don Dunphy, right? I guess Don Dunphy, maybe leading contender for that.
Yeah, I can't remember if that was in Madison Square Garden in 1970 fight. Something tells me it might have been.
I have a friend of mine who probably knows that. I'll ask him.
So Foreman comes along at a time where uh, Frazier is the champ. Ali wants to get back into the ring because he's been laid off for 3+ years, and at the same time, Frazier gets the title. Foreman had been fighting on some of the undercards of the Frazier fights, and they probably knew each other fairly well. And then Foreman is unstoppable. People make the mistake of standing in front of him. If they don't stand in front of him, his footwork is not that bad for a big guy who learned boxing late and got in the Olympics and devastates everyone in Mexico City. So over to you for your first thoughts on the rise of Foreman when Ali was on the sidelines.
Well, I didn't experience it when it first happened. It all came later. You know, they followed it all years later. Yeah, he was like that big booming rock'em sock'em. He's like the ultimate rock'em sock'em fighter. Not too much science, technical. Just boom, boom, boom. But nobody could handle it.
Mm-hmm.
And just pounded his way to the world championship. He didn't have the tight punches and the slick combinations, or the fancy moves, but it was just sheer brute power. Yeah, he was one of the first ones that I kind of embraced as a kid, because it's so blurry, but I guess yeah, he lost to Ali, and then he was on the comeback trail, and I remember I really liked him, and then he lost to Jimmy Young, and he turned into kind of like a sad figure. Lost to Ali, lost to Jimmy Young, and here was the guy who was the best, who just kind of crashed, and then he just gave up the sport. And then I remember a few years after he gave up the sport, there was a boxing magazine article about he turned into a preacher, and they actually gave the address in Texas where you could write a letter to him. And I did write a letter to him. And I was kind of asking him, telling him, why not come back? You're not too old. You can do it. You were such a great fighter. And then like a year later, he actually wrote me back. I was a young teen, and you can imagine the thrill of getting a letter from George Foreman, letterhead. And he responded on his letterhead and 2 sides of the paper, handwritten. And he said he doesn't follow the sport anymore. He's not going to be coming back. He doesn't even watch TV. He called it the TV the most ungodly thing on the scene. I remember that quote. And then, okay, I guess he's never going to come back, but saved the letter, of course. And then he actually did come back, less than a decade later. I guess I got the letter in around 1980, and he did come back toward come back to boxing toward the late 80s. And then in the 90s, I became a boxing writer and actually ended up doing an interview with him, biofile interview with him for, I think it was the Tommy Morrison fight for the program, for the official program. And I asked him by chance, do you happen to remember I sent you a letter as a kid? And he goes, oh yeah, I had to write you back. You were so serious.
That's great that he remembered your letter.
Yeah. And it's true. I was very serious trying to talk him into coming back. Yeah.
Where was your interview?
The interview we did by the phone, we did by phone, and it actually was in the official program of the Tommy Morrison fight. I did the Tommy Morrison and George Foreman biofile interviews, and they were both in that program. I asked them questions like the greatest moment, most painful moment, favorite movies, first job, first car, favorite ice cream flavor, just like a comparison.
Do you still have the letter that he wrote to you when you were a kid?
Come on, you think I would? There's no way I would ever lose that.
Okay, so could you scan that and
Oh,
email it to me?
it's in my New Jersey office. I will. Yeah, I got to dig that up and read it again. Yeah, I got to write an article about it actually, because it's kind of contradictory of what he later had his own TV show and he became a boxer again. So he kind of changed his mind. Who knows what factors really did change his mind?
Well, you wrote that letter. I'm sure other people talked to him about that, and he did run out of money, and he had a lot of people depending on him, and his kids and all of the youth people in the youth program, his church. A lot of people were depending on him. I think he might have been at that time on his third wife, so maybe he had payments to his other two wives as well.
Comeback took a while though. He had a lot of fights before it generated momentum. Remember, he didn't just walk right into the title fight. He had about, was it like a dozen fights? Took a long time.
He had 81 total fights in his life. I'll have to look and see how many Holmes had. Holyfield probably had a lot. Ali had, I think, 40 something. I thought his last fight, fight number 81, which was November 22nd, 97, at age 48 years and 316 days in Atlantic City. I thought he won that fight against Shannon Briggs. What did you think?
Yeah, I remember I didn't really watch that live because I was at a wedding. Yeah, I missed that fight, but then saw it. Yeah, it was a really close fight. It's one of those ones I could have gone either way.
And before that, Lou Savarese, Crawford Grimsley, Axel Schulz is a name that I know, but the other two guys I don't know. Michael Moore, his win, which was just in fight number 77 in November 5th, my birthday, and in 1994. He was 45 years, 299 days, MGM Grand Garden Arena, Paradise, Nevada. You weren't at that fight, were you?
No, I was not, and I should have been because my friend Matt Shapiro, who I went to see Rocky with, he was really, really into that fight, and he knew Foreman was going to win. And yeah, and that was the fight that we really should have went to because that was like the full circle. Started boxing with the Rocky fight at the theater, and then this was like the ultimate moment of the sport, kind of for our friendship. But yeah, I should have been there for that one.
What was his reasoning why he thought Foreman was going to win, if you remember?
Uh, just how it made business sense. He was like an A side figure. He was a moneymaker. He was the most charismatic, colorful personality in the sport at the time, and the heavyweight division. He just knew that Foreman was going to win that fight.
So Teddy Atlas talks very candidly in his podcast, which is very good. I encourage people to check that out, about how he called Michael Moore, who he said he loved, still loves him. If somebody is doing what Atlas says they do at some point. They don't have to do it in the way Atlas wants to each time, but he has a forgiving nature to him. He wants you to be honest with him, so nothing wrong with that. But he said Michael Moore was a head case, and that's not uncommon with elite athletes. But he said he had to learn how to work with him, and so he learned that certain things did work in his training with him and his psychological coaching. So he said, don't, he told he told Michael Moore, he said, don't stand in front of him. He said, you're a boxer. We know you've got knockout punching ability, but this guy's a different kind of an animal. He is a wrecking machine. Don't stand in front of him. Anybody who does that, like back in the early times, Norton and Frazier, and a long list of other people in the Olympics as well, don't stand in front of him. And Michael Moore, unfortunately, did exactly what Teddy Atlas said he shouldn't do, and he stood in front of him late in the fight and then got knocked out. Your thoughts on that?
It was always a curious strategic decision by Michael Moore to do that, and also I thought it was also a curious business decision that he did not demand the immediate rematch. So yeah, it's
Cloudy
yeah, mystery.
mystery.
He was a great fighter, but it's more like an introvert fighter. Didn't really have the charismatic personality, but he was a great fighter. But he just wasn't built to be comfortable with the media and the big crowds. And there's a lot of fighters like that, but he was a great fighter, Michael Moore.
So Michael Moore, interestingly enough, beats Holyfield and then later loses. Is that correct? Did he have two fights? He won one and lost one to Holyfield?
He won the first one by decision, and that set up the fight with Foreman. And I can't remember what happened in the rematch.
Holyfield Moore 2. Moore lost his IBF title in a unification match with Holyfield. He was knocked down 5 times before ringside doctor Flip Homanowski advised referee Mitch Halpern to stop the bout in round 8.
Remember, Michael Moore was in one of the most exciting fights ever against Burt Cooper. Do you remember that one?
Burt Cooper, short guy, correct?
Short guy was like a notorious wrecking machine at one point in Philadelphia. Like he was like a Mike Tyson terror, but they said that he had some out of the ring problems that kind of wrecked his career. But he was an awesome fighter in his early part of his career.
That was May
I was
15th,
at that fight. I was
May
at the Moore
15th, 92 in Atlantic City.
Taj Mahal. I was there. It was like Foreman Lyle.
Here they say Etes Arena.
Mark Etes Arena. Yeah, he was the Trump associate employee who died in the helicopter crash, and they named the arena after him.
So that was 92. Moore was 29-0, TKO in the 5th against Burt Cooper. So you're saying that's a good fight to watch.
That's comparable to the Foreman Lyle fight, believe it or not. What was Cooper's record at that time? Was he undefeated?
All right, let's take a look at Cooper.
Or I think he lost to Holyfield. He already lost to Holyfield.
27-9 when he fought Michael Moore. He had lost to Holyfield, lost to Riddick Bowe, lost to Ray Mercer, all top guys. Lost to Foreman and a guy named Nate Miller, and then some other people I'm not familiar with. He lost to Carl Williams in 1987. I mentioned that's Carl the Truth Williams.
That was in Atlantic City. Yeah, that was when I was in college. I went to that fight. I got a media credential. I think that was his first loss to Carl Williams on ABC on a Saturday afternoon. Yeah.
Atlantic City Resorts International, June 21st of 87. So were you off of college at that time for your summer break?
Yeah, but I would still get media credentials to go to fights in Atlantic City somehow. They would let me go.
Year of media credentials?
I wrote for the college newspaper, The Independent, at Kane College, now Kane University. And yeah, boxing was so friendly to the media that they would actually give a newspaper college newspaper media credentials. I actually got a media credential for the Tyson Spinks press conference. They didn't give me a ringside. I didn't get a credential for that fight. It was too big. But I did get they allowed me to go to the fight that day. Azuma Nelson fought on Channel 7 that day in the same place where the Tyson Spinks weigh-in was on a Saturday afternoon. So yeah, boxing's really friendly with people who want to break into the sport. They never asked me a question. Hey, what about the college newspaper in the summer?
So the biggest fight of my life was the Rumble in the Jungle in Zaire, Foreman and Ali, all the musicians over there, famous people over there in Zaire, a country that had been in turmoil for a long time, the Belgian Congo, and two Americans are over there, Foreman and Ali, 8 years age difference. Ali is, I think, 32 at the time. And the famous movies are made about this, When We Were Kings documentary, and then the movie Ali with Will Smith. And I think the thing that helped Ali the most was that when the fight was delayed 6 weeks. He said he was ready right at the time that Foreman got the cut from an elbow from his sparring partner who put up his arms, and Foreman got an elbow to the forehead or right by the eye and got a pretty bad cut. So that was 6 week delay. But I think not only did it give Ali a chance to train more, but it took the wind out of Foreman's sails because he did not like being in Zaire. And he did a big mistake. He brought a German Shepherd with him, and that's the animal that the Belgian military used to keep the Congolese in check, and they didn't like that. So over to Scoop for some of his thoughts on the delay of 6 weeks and some of the things that were going on before the fight in Zaire.
Hi, this is Sifu Slim, author of The Aging Athlete. In this book, you're going to get to hear about two different groups of former high-performance athletes. One group, which is made up of 90% of the former athletes, does not do physical activity on a regular basis and tends to suffer the consequences of a sedentary lifestyle. The other group, which is made up of 10% of the former athletes, is doing physical activity on a regular basis and tends to thrive through the aging process, or at least has a better chance at coping with the aging process. We could have taken these folks to a lab and done all kinds of tests on them. Instead, we slowed them down and sat them down and asked them, in their own words, to describe why they're wired the way they are, so that we all, former athletes and non-athletes, can use some of their inspirational and motivational and mindset lessons in our own lives. I hope you pick up a copy today. You can go to theagingathlete.com. And when you have a chance to read it, I'd love to hear back from you to find out what your thoughts are on the stories of these aging athletes.
Well, don't forget, Norman Mailer wrote a book about that fight. It's just called The Fight. One of the best sports books I've ever read. Oh my God, what a great book! Have you read that?
I haven't read The Fight, no.
Oh my God, you're gonna love that. And the film When We Were Kings is also one of the greatest documentaries ever made. That sporting event, one of the greatest, maybe one of the highlight moments in the history of the sport. That fight. Just the way Ali won that fight, from people thinking he was going to get permanently injured and really hurt, and a lot of people didn't want that fight for him. But then the way he won that was maybe the most electric moment one of the most electric moments in boxing history. And Foreman discussed that in his book. I think it's called By George. And I remember the takeaway from that was, I remember he was talking about his friendship with Sonny Liston. And Sonny Liston talked about how when he fought Muhammad Ali, he felt the energy that nobody wanted him to win. Everybody wanted Ali to win. And that factored in with his performances in both of the Clay and Ali fights, that he kind of subconsciously surrendered. And Foreman kind of made the message that implied that he kind of subconsciously surrendered. It's a very interesting part of the book that he, I think it's called By George, the Foreman biography. And maybe, he just wasn't strong enough mentally to deal with the feeling that everybody wanted Muhammad Ali to win that fight. Nobody there wanted him. Crowd energy makes a difference in sporting events, tennis and boxing.
So Norman Mailer, journalist and author, fight fan, and George Plimpton, another famous journalist, they talk about Ali in his dressing room, and they said it was like Ali was going to the gallows, that destruction awaited Ali. People thought that, the journalists thought that, and people in Ali's corner, except for Angelo Dundee, the other people also thought that. So it's a scene of opposites. You have this fear and depression on the side of Ali's camp and the journalists. And then at the end of the fight, when Ali wins, you have this pride and euphoria. So you go from the lowest of the low to the highest of the high, with Ali as king and George Foreman exhausted and stumbling back to his corner, and then stumbling out of the ring early. And then, the 50,000 or however many fans were watching, maybe 20,000, in this raucous moment of euphoria over the scoop.
Ali never doubted himself for a second in that fight. Even, you remember when he was at the Foreman Norton fight in Venezuela, and he predicted before the fight that he thought Norton was going to win the fight, either by knockout or decision. He could win the fight. So then, after seeing what Foreman did to him, knocked him out in the second round, one-sided blowout. Remember
he got up into the ring.
Bob Sheridan interviewed Ali in the ring apron after the fight.
Yeah.
Muhammad, how could you possibly think you're going to beat this guy? Well, he just did to Norton, who went 24 rounds with you, close. And then Ali, you remember that?
Yep.
Ali just said, no, this guy just punches too wide. He's too slow. I'm too fast for this guy. And he just was 100% certain that he was going to beat Foreman.
I'm sure he had in his years of being in boxing, big, strong people come in and test him. And he already knew that from the time he was 15, 18, that he could outdo those big, strong guys with that head movement, and parrying punches and keeping away from them. And then his speed, he could hit them when after they missed, he could hit them twice. He already knew that, I'm sure.
And he also knew that he could lay on the ropes and take the punches too. I guess he kind of knew that he was the greatest after all.
Here's a clip from Norman Mailer talking about Ali and how Foreman could cut off the ring.
Where he would say, how is Foreman going to get near to me? I'm going to dance. I'm going to dance and dance. That man will look foolish trying to find me. And as he gropes his way forward in this storm of blindness at the speed of my dancing, I will strike him with my jab. Pooh, 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 he would go, and so forth. We heard this over and over and over, and Foreman heard it too. Foreman was working now on what's called cutting off the ring. Now, cutting off the ring essentially just means cornering your opponent against the ropes or in a corner. And it's an art. It's a balletic art. You have to have very good footwork. Foreman's footwork, he was a big, powerful man, but his footwork was far better than anyone had expected. He worked with very fast fighters, smaller than himself, who certainly could dance, and he worked on cornering them, and he was very good. And we'd watch this, and the combination of hitting the heavy bag and watching Foreman cut off the ring made most of the fight writers, myself included, terribly pessimistic about Ali's chances.
So there's Foreman sparring and Norman Mailer commenting on Foreman's footwork, which in 1974, for a guy that weighed 228 pounds at fight weight, something around there, was pretty good. He was a very good athlete, Foreman, and he played football for a while growing up, and he was a very good street fighter, and he was well put together. And then he had the mindset where he got picked on a lot by his people in his family, and then by the age 16, he grew into this gigantic person. So he always had that, a lot of boxers and martial artists have that background of getting picked on by family members or people in the neighborhood, people at school, or both, and they overcome that with this, this art form. Over to Scoop for his thoughts on that.
Well, he didn't have to use the footwork too much in that fight, though. Ali changed the game plan.
Yeah. He stopped dancing because he realized it wasn't working. His punches, even his right hand leads, were just a little quick pop to form, and they weren't stopping him in his tracks, and like he did to Liston in some of the rounds in the first fight. He was really rocking Liston with 4 and 5 punches and combinations, but now at age 32, he was unable to put those things together and dodge punches the way he could in his 20s.
That was the Matador and the Bull, the rope-a-dope, and there should have been a rematch. I don't know why they didn't have the rematch the next year in Madison Square Garden. That would have been a very interesting rematch.
I would imagine that Ali was interested in safer money at the time. Big mistake was going in with fighting Holmes at the end of Ali's career, probably for money because things were mismanaged. Amazingly enough, and being the most famous person in the world for a period of maybe 2 decades, he had very little endorsements. He had the Raid commercial where he did one for the Roach Killer, the Raid Roach Killer, and then he did another one for a battery. He says, "We're up here in Alaska testing the Sears Die Hard, a battery that's tough." So I mean, 2 not very flamboyant companies, a Roach and an automobile battery, and that's all he had. He didn't have endorsements like McEnroe and Roger Federer and Michael Jordan, who were very famous, but Ali was the most famous person in the world for 2 decades. But because of his stance on Vietnam and because of his background in the faith of Islam and the Black Muslims, the corporate world didn't want to embrace him and fund him in that marketing kind of a way.
Yeah, you would think Muhammad Ali could have sold more hamburgers than George Foreman, considering how popular he was back then. Did you ever see that video of Ali walking down South Beach, Miami, 1980? He's just walking. It's a 11 minute video. He's just walking down Ocean Drive or Collins Avenue in South Beach. And somebody filmed it with like a Super 8 camera. Just Muhammad Ali walking down the street. And the way everybody reacts to the seeing, it creates like a hysteria, pandemonium. It's on YouTube. It shows Ali was the most popular probably athlete in the history of sports. And it's my favorite thing to watch on Muhammad Ali, more than his fights and his interviews. Just watching him walk down the street and somebody filming it, and the way he reacts with the little old lady and the guy who wants to shadow boxing with him on the sidewalk. It's like the essence of Muhammad Ali.
What are some takeaways we can look to when we talk about Foreman, who passed away not too long ago? A guy who transformed himself from a street thug to an Olympian, and then to a champion, and then lost all of that economic wherewithal and fame and notoriety, and got into spirituality and religion and family. And then another transformation. What are your thoughts on the transformations of the life of this famous American?
Yeah, he's like a transformation like Andre Agassi. How he turned from a kind of a negative figure into a positive figure. Mike Tyson has done that. George Foreman became probably one of the most recognized, beloved, popular sports figures ever. He ended up becoming wealthier than Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson.
George Foreman Grill and probably had real estate investments. Larry Holmes has done well in Eastern Pennsylvania with his real estate investments. Larry Holmes, hard worker. I don't think Larry Holmes finished high school, but he stayed on it his whole life. You can still call him. His name and his phone number are on the commercial real estate properties, and so I was able to get his phone number, and he's in my cell phone. Larry Holmes. Have you met Holmes?
Oh yeah, many times.
What do you
He
think
might have
of
been
Holmes?
he might have been the real greatest. He might have been better than Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
He had better jab. He used to beat Ali in sparring in Deer Lake when he was an unknown. He might have been better than Ali.
Mhm.
And he's the heavyweight champion of our youth.
Mhm.
He was always on TV. He was always great performances. He might be the greatest of all time at his best.
Who would you put up in the top five?
Well, it fluctuates. Lennox Lewis, of course, beat every man he ever fought. The Klitschko brothers dominated for so long. Larry Holmes at his best, and they have figured out how to beat those guys. But the young Muhammad Ali, the young Mike Tyson, 86 to 89, and maybe even Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury would have been dedicated like Evander Holyfield and Novak Djokovic. If he would have been that serious about his training and taking care of his body, Tyson Fury might have been the greatest of all time.
You had placed in a previous conversation Usyk in a high group. You putting him in the top 10, not the top five?
Oh, I forgot about him. Yeah, he might be the greatest too. What he's done, his career is just the perfect career. The gold medal, undefeated cruiserweight champion, undefeated heavyweight champion. Just keeps beating everybody. You got to consider him in that equation too. Can't believe I just forgot him, but he's been kind of out of the news lately. But he did just sign. They did the press conference in England. He's going to fight Dubois next, the rematch, which is a very dangerous fight for him. But he doesn't care. He'll fight whoever he has to fight. The man does not dodge anybody.
Eddie Futch talks about his short time with Riddick Bowe, and he said Riddick Bowe's size and skill, if he kept at it and he kept working hard, just like you mentioned that Holyfield did and some of these other greats did, he said Riddick Bowe could have been one of the greats.
He also said that about Jerry Cooney. He said if he would have been able to manage Jerry Cooney's career from the beginning and pick the right fights for him instead of the too many easy fights, and then he wasn't ready for the Larry Holmes title shot, he said Jerry Cooney could have been one of the greats. Yeah, Riddick Bowe clearly had the talent and the physical to be an all-time great, but what happened there was once he got to the title, he kind of shut it down. It happens to a lot of great fighters. Once they win the title, they're never the same after. That was enough just to win the title. Buster Douglas, Ricardo Mayorga.
Yeah, McEnroe talks about that. He said getting to the top is a lot easier than staying at the top. That number one position, everyone's gunning for you, and all the fans expect you to have your way at the top, to beat number 2, to beat number 8, beat number 20. And Roger Federer knew that everyone was gunning for him for his 20-plus year career. And these young people would come along at between 16 and 19, and they would get to this world-class level because they wanted to be like Federer and they wanted to beat him at some point. And some of those people got their chance and they beat Federer, and that's just the way it goes. They're gunning for you.
It's happening with Djokovic now. This whole Djokovic, Federer, Nadal era has inspired a huge generation of tennis players who want to beat them, who want to be better than them. They're working so hard to take tennis to the higher level than where Djokovic, Federer, and Nadal have taken it. So people are concerned about the future of tennis after Djokovic. It might even get better, just like after it was Federer and Nadal took tennis to another level after Sampras and Agassi. But going back to Riddick Bowe, I got some inside information from Andrew Galata. Remember, Andrew Galata said he saw Bowe as an amateur in Europe at a tournament, and he said he was a light heavyweight at the time. He only weighed like 175 pounds. And then a year later, he saw him again at another amateur tournament, and he was shocked. I remember him describing it. He was shocked at how much heavier and bigger Riddick Bowe was than a year earlier. And then I talked to some boxing trainers in Gleason's gym in Brooklyn about that, and they told me that Riddick Bowe had like close to 10 brothers and sisters, and he never got enough to eat. And then when his trainer, as an amateur, started taking care of him, feeding him better, he filled out. So he became much bigger and stronger, heavier. But, you know, it showed that he was actually malnourished for part of his childhood.
Oh,
And when he became champion, he made up for those lost meals. Remember, he had the refrigerator in his bedroom. So we can't really relate with and understand what he went through being a malnourished athlete, world-class amateur athlete. So it is kind of understandable what happened to him. Once he won the title and became huge success, he lost the discipline, some of the discipline, sacrifice.
yeah, you mentioned Galata, and he had incredible ability, great size. And then when he went in and he fought Tyson, he got two injuries within a very short time span. It might have been in the same round, but he got his ribs broken, and then he got hit in the head where he got a part of his eye socket or something like that shattered. And Lou Duva was telling him to get back in there, and Galata said no. He said something's wrong. And so they thought, a lot of people thought he was wimping out, but it's not true. He had a broken ribs, maybe a couple, and then something along his eye socket that was shattered. Do you remember hearing about that?
Yeah, it was. They said it was his cheekbone, fractured cheekbone, and it was his trainer at the time was Al Certo. It wasn't Lou Duva.
Wasn't Duva.
And they wanted him to continue the fight, but they didn't know how he felt. And Andrew insisted he didn't want to continue the fight. But he told me years later, after I did an interview with him when he was on his comeback later, and he said that before the fight, he felt everything was against him. The referee came in and warned him about any kind of illegal tactics. And then when the fight started, he said Tyson headbutted him, and the referee didn't say anything, didn't do anything. Mm-hmm. So that really bothered him, and then he found his way out of the fight. But you made me think of what Mike Tyson said about Henry Tillman. He said there's some fighters he thought Henry Tillman was a great fighter. He would have been a Hall of Fame great champion, legend, but he just didn't have confidence and self-belief. And I think Henry Tillman is not the only great fighter like that.
Was Tillman the man who beat Tyson in the Olympic trials?
Twice. He beat him twice in controversial decisions. And then he ended up winning the gold medal, and Tyson missed the Olympics. And then Tyson fought him as a pro and knocked him out in the first round. But he talked about that. He talked very praiseworthy of Henry Tillman in his book, Undisputed Truth. And I never heard another fighter say that about another fighter, saying that he's great, he could have been a legend, he just didn't have the confidence and self-belief that he could.
No.
And you have to wonder if that applies to so many other fighters, and also tennis players. Is tennis and boxing the one-on-one?
So that's probably a good place to wind down the form, and then we can pick up in a few minutes on Leroy Neiman. So I'm Sifu Slim. Give us a thumbs up, folks, like and subscribe, and we will talk to you in the next video. And if you want to get a hold of Scoop, share your contact information for what you're promoting with your books and web presence.
Latest book is one of my latest books is on Leroy Neiman, Portrait of the Artist, a collection of stories and anecdotes from people who knew him and met him and worked with him. Leroy Neiman was a great friend for 20 years and one of the coolest guys I ever met. from boxing.
Fantastic, Scoop. Good speaking with you. I'll send you the link when it's up and loaded. And big mahalo, Scoop. Look forward to the next go around.
Thanks for inviting me. Loved yeah, it's awesome to talk with you again. We got to meet sometime soon in the future.
We'll have to swap coasts from West Palm over to Bradenton.
Or meet in the middle or something.
Or meet in the middle. That sounds good. Lake Okeechobee. All right, brother. Peace out.
Thank you.